Hi there, I'm Shannan, and this is the story of how my mom took my sister on a family trip and left me behind like I didn't even matter. But a week later, regret came knocking harder than they ever expected. How does a family go from pretending everything's fine to barely holding the pieces together? Why did it take losing everything for them to finally see me? What time are you listening to this and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear your story too. And if this hits a little too close to home, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter we uncover together. The 4th of July breeze sifted through the window of my small apartment in Bend, Oregon, fluttering the corner of the airline ticket I'd taped to the fridge like a promise. I had packed the night before, methodically folding clothes I thought might be too formal, too casual, too much. Every corner of my suitcase was tucked neatly like I could organize my way into belonging. I sat cross-legged on the worn couch, staring at my packed bag. A quiet hope gnawed inside me that maybe this time I'd feel part of something. Maybe this trip would be different. No awkward glances exchanged over my head. No being left out of inside jokes I was never told. In the back of my mind, the echoes of old birthday parties flickered, ones where Skylar's cake had 3 tiers and mine barely had candles. I shook the memories off like dust and zipped up the suitcase. Today was a new page. The airport buzzed with the usual symphony, wheels dragging across tile, overhead announcements blaring about boarding zones. I clutched my boarding pass, heart thudding with something between excitement and dread. At the check-in desk, I handed over my ID and smiled, a small polite thing that barely reached my eyes. The attendant tapped on her keyboard, frowning. "I'm sorry," she said. "It appears your ticket's been canceled." The words floated in the air, surreal. I blinked. "What? That can't be right." She double-checked and triple-checked. But it was done. No ticket, no explanation. I turned around, scanning the crowd until I spotted them. Mom, Dad, and Skylar clustered near a coffee kiosk. Skylar caught my eye and smiled. Not a kind smile, a knowing one. When I told them, Mom gasped theatrically. "Oh, honey, it must be some system glitch," she said too brightly, clutching my arm like an afterthought. Dad mumbled something about calling the airline, but his eyes darted everywhere except at me. Skylar stayed quiet, sipping her drink through a straw, the corner of her mouth twitching like she was holding back a laugh. There was no scramble to fix it, no frantic call to the desk, no insistence that I had to come. They said they were sorry, and then they left. I stood alone in the middle of the terminal, the announcement for their boarding gate echoing overhead. I clutched my useless boarding pass, my ticket to nowhere, and watched as they disappeared behind the security line. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in the recycled airport air, the way you breathe through pain at the dentist. Maybe it was always meant to be this way. Maybe I was never truly part of their perfect family photo, no matter how many times I pressed myself into the frame. I stood there, clutching my ticket to nowhere, and for the first time, I understood. They never expected me to come with them. The suitcase sat untouched in the middle of my living room like a monument to something broken. I hadn't unpacked it. I hadn't even zipped it open. Every time I glanced at it, a small, bitter voice in my head whispered, "You packed for a trip you were never meant to take." The apartment was silent except for the ticking of the clock over the stove, a soft reminder that time kept moving forward whether I did or not. I pulled my knees up to my chest on the couch, the worn fabric pressing into my skin, and replayed every second at the airport like a courtroom testimony. I should have known. The quickness with which they accepted my absence, Skylar's barely hidden grin, Mom's dismissive pat on my arm. Still, something in me needed proof, an explanation that didn't end with me being the fool again. On impulse, I grabbed my laptop and pulled up my email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to slam the lid shut, to let ignorance be its own mercy. Instead, I searched for anything from the airline, and there it was. A cancellation confirmation dated 2 days before the flight, sent from an address that mimicked mine, almost perfectly. Almost. My stomach twisted. Skylar. She had made an account under my name and canceled my ticket. It wasn't a clerical error. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, cold, personal. The betrayal didn't ignite a fire in my chest. It hollowed it out. I pressed the call button on my phone, knuckles whitening as it rang. Claudine picked up on the 3rd try. "Mom," I said, voice thin. Skylar canceled my ticket. I found the email. There was a pause, then a breathy laugh. Sweetheart, you're being too sensitive. I'm sure it was just a mix-up. I gripped the edge of the couch. A mix-up would mean someone cared enough to notice. Don't be dramatic, she said lightly, the way you'd brush off a child making too much noise in the back seat. We're already here. There's nothing we can do now. Ronald's voice chimed faintly from the background. Maybe it's better to just let it go, honey. Skylar's silence on the other end was louder than either of them. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just ended the call. An hour later, a text popped up on my screen. Boarding now. We'll send pictures. No delay, no hesitation, no second thoughts. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Then, without a word, I deleted the entire conversation thread, family history and all, watching it disappear with a single swipe. Maybe losing me was easier for them than losing a flight connection. The days after they left bled into each other, slow and sticky like syrup left too long in the sun. My apartment, once a small but comforting space, now felt cavernous, every empty chair and unused mug whispering a quiet mockery. I drifted from room to room without purpose, ignoring the buzzing phone on the counter where friends' names lit up in soft, hopeful flashes. I wasn't ready to answer them. I wasn't ready to explain. The silence inside me was thick, a dense fog pressing against my ribs. I wore it like a second skin, finding some strange comfort in the isolation, as if refusing to speak made the betrayal less real. It was during one of these silent afternoons when the call came. I almost didn't answer, but the familiarity of the ringtone, a custom one I had set for my mother years ago, compelled me. Claudine's voice poured through the speaker, falsely bright. "Just checking in, sweetheart," she said, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't been erased. When I didn't respond right away, she filled the space. "I think you're overthinking all of this. You've always been sensitive." Her voice softened on the last word, wrapping it in a bow like it was a compliment instead of a blade. I closed my eyes, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. "You know how Skylar is," she continued. "She's young. She doesn't mean things the way you take them." There it was, the same old dance, excusing, minimizing, denying. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. What was the point? When I hung up, the phone slipped from my hand and landed on the couch with a dull thud. An hour later, a notification buzzed against the silence. A new photo from Skylar. I opened it without thinking, and the air left my lungs. It was a group shot, Skylar, Mom, Dad, all smiling under a banner that read, "Family Vacation 2024. Skylar's caption burned hotter than the July sun, "Family minus the drama." Each grin in the photo cut deeper than the sharpest knife. I barely had time to process before a second photo followed. Matching t-shirts, bright and obnoxious, with names emblazoned across the backs. Ronald, Claudine, Skylar. My name was there too, scratched out in thick, angry red marker. My hand trembled as I deleted the images, but the damage was done. They were seared into my memory like cigarette burns on skin. That night, I sat curled up in the corner of the couch, lights off, phone face down on the floor. The city outside my window hummed along, oblivious to the quiet devastation blooming inside my chest. Maybe this was how people disappeared. Not with a scream, but with a silent erasure nobody bothered to notice. The text came in just after noon, casual as a weather update. "Dad not feeling great, probably the food," Claudine wrote, as if food poisoning explained the growing pit in my stomach. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling the edges of dread prickle along my spine. It was too light, too dismissive, exactly the kind of gloss Mom liked to paint over cracks she didn't want anyone to see. I typed back a simple, "Keep me updated," and tossed the phone onto the kitchen table, harder than I meant to. The hours crawled by. I tried reading, tried cleaning, tried pretending life was moving along normally, but every task felt hollow, like I was moving underwater. When the next call came, it was just after dinner. Claudine's voice was tighter this time, a taut string ready to snap. "He's feeling worse," she said, "but it's probably just dehydration or something." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "Are you sure? Did he take his medication?" There was a pause, too long. "We can't find it," she admitted, her words rushed, defensive. "Probably packed wrong. You know how chaotic traveling is?" I closed my eyes. "Mom, you need to check, really check." "I'm sure it's nothing," she insisted. "Skylar's helping look through everything." Of course she was. I hung up feeling hollowed out, the walls of the apartment pressing closer. Skylar, the ever-helpful daughter, playing the role of savior she had perfected since we were kids. An hour later, another message buzzed in. "Skylar found a few of Dad's pills under the bed. Weird, right?" The words twisted inside me, sour and wrong. I could almost see it, the way Skylar would flutter around the hotel room looking concerned, the way she always looked concerned when she was covering her tracks. It wasn't just lost medication, it was a pattern, a playbook. Hide the problem, cause the damage, then swoop in for applause when she fixed it. The silence on their end grew heavier over the next day. Frantic missed calls, half-finished texts, Claudine's voice cracking under pressure, Ronald barely speaking at all. But they still didn't leave, still clung to the fantasy of a perfect family trip, even as it unraveled thread by thread. I stood alone in my kitchen that night, the overhead light buzzing faintly. My phone sat face up on the counter, Claudine's latest text staring back at me like a dare. Skylar found some of Dad's pills under the bed. Weird, right? I read it once, twice, a third time just to be sure the words hadn't changed. Sometimes the people you trust to save you are the ones who buried you under the floorboards. The message came in jagged, broken pieces through the static of my mother's panic. "They found it," she gasped, like she had just surfaced from underwater. "They found the pills, in Skylar's room." I sat back against the kitchen counter, the cold surface pressing into my spine. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was no longer about jealousy, it was about survival. Skylar hadn't just been careless or petty, she had been dangerous, and they had let her. Worse, they had cheered her on, blind to the cost. The next call was a whirlwind of excuses. Skylar's voice filtered faintly through the background, weaving elaborate lies like a spider spinning a web. She accused the hotel staff of planting the medication, of targeting their family out of spite or incompetence. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding," Claudine said, her voice thin, brittle. I could hear the crack in her composure, like a hairline fracture that no amount of pretending could seal shut. For the first time, Mom didn't sound entirely sure. Ronald said nothing. Maybe he couldn't find the words. Maybe he didn't want to. The apartment around me blurred, the muted colors and chipped edges of my life folding inward. I remembered smaller moments, birthday presents that mysteriously went missing, whispered accusations that turned friends against me, the way Skylar always managed to cry at just the right moment, and how they always believed her. This wasn't new. It had always been there, just hidden beneath layers of smiles and second chances. I opened my phone and scrolled mindlessly until I landed on an old photo Skylar had sent days earlier. Their grinning faces under a perfect sky, their arms wrapped around each other like some storybook family. I zoomed in, staring at the picture not as a memory now, but as evidence. Proof of what they chose to see, and what they chose to ignore. You can only cover rot with pretty paint for so long. Eventually, the stench seeps through. The phone vibrated against the kitchen counter like a warning shot before a storm. When I answered, Claudine's voice was high and panicked, her words tripping over themselves in a frantic rush. "She's lost it, Shannan. Oh my God, she's throwing things, screaming." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, every muscle in my body locking into place. At the hotel lobby, Skylar had unleashed herself completely, overturned tables, shattered vases, shoved another guest who got too close. Staff tried to calm her, but Skylar was beyond reason, a hurricane finally free from its borrowed calm. Hotel management called the police. There was no other choice. I listened in silence, feeling no shock, no sadness. Only the steady undercurrent of something cold, something I had carried inside me longer than I realized. I had warned them. I had seen it coming like a slow, inevitable collapse. When the officers arrived, Skylar didn't back down. She screamed about betrayal, about being misunderstood, about how everyone always made her the villain. And then, with a venom I could feel through the phone line, she blamed me. "It's Shannan's fault," she shrieked to the officers. "She planned this. She told me to do it." The numbness was complete now, a shell around my ribs. Claudine sobbed on the line, horrified. Ronald said nothing, his silence heavier than any apology he might have fumbled. Later that evening, when the panic had dulled into exhaustion, Claudine called again. Her voice was small, uncertain. Maybe we made mistakes, she whispered. I didn't answer. What was there left to say? Some fractures you can fill with gold and call it art. Others just leave dust and silence. I set the phone down gently, the kitchen light buzzing overhead like a tired wasp. The apartment around me remained unchanged, quiet, solid, indifferent to the war crumbling outside its walls. There's a kind of silence louder than any scream, the sound of a bond snapping at last. The call came in while I was washing a single coffee mug, the tap water rushing too loudly to drown out the shrillness of Claudine's panic. Our passports are gone, she cried, her words tumbling over each other like a dam finally breaking. We can't leave. We can't get new ones without the originals. I set the mug down carefully, almost tenderly, as if the slightest wrong move might send everything shattering to the floor, stranded, trapped. The very family that had so easily left me behind was now shackled by their own blindness. Ronald, for once, spoke up. He suspected theft, a random robbery. Claudine, ever the dreamer, clung to the idea of an accident, a mistake, a simple mix-up. I said nothing. Deep down, I already knew the truth. I didn't need to be there to feel the fingerprints Skylar left behind, oily and deliberate. Later that afternoon, another email pinged into my inbox, forwarded by mistake. A blurry scan of a letter submitted to the U.S. consulate, requesting passport replacement assistance. Except the sender's name wasn't Ronald or Claudine. It was Skylar, and the handwriting scrawled across the bottom was unmistakably hers. She hadn't just lost the passports. She had sabotaged their chances of getting new ones, ensuring their exile a little longer, maybe forever. I stared at the screen, a strange calm settling over me. It wasn't about being noticed anymore. It wasn't even about winning. It was about survival. Skylar didn't want attention. She wanted control. Control over the narrative, over the family, over me. And I was done letting her have it. I composed a message slowly. Each word weighed like a stone in my hand before I threw it into the pond. When you're ready to tell the truth, I typed, maybe you'll be ready to come home. I didn't wait for a response. Freedom wasn't something they would hand me. I had to take it. The call came after midnight, when even the streetlights outside my apartment had given up and gone dark. Claudine's voice was smaller this time, stripped of its usual varnish of control. We need your help, she said, words tumbling over each other like pebbles down a hill. Please? I listened, my hand resting calmly on the kitchen counter, feeling every beat of their desperation pulse through the phone line. They had no way to return home, no money left after endless hotel extensions, no friends willing to wire cash without explanation. Ronald, she admitted, refused to speak about it. His silence was no longer neutral. It was shame. I didn't rush to answer. I let the silence grow heavy between us, remembering all the times I had reached out with empty hands and been met with nothing. They needed me. And for the first time, I held the power to choose. I cleared my throat, my voice low and steady. I'll help, I said, but there are conditions. Claudine's sharp inhale echoed through the line. You and Ronald will sign a legal document, I continued. You will release any claims on my finances, my responsibilities to you, my future. This will be in writing, non-negotiable. There was a pause, long, painful, like the crackle before a thunderstorm breaks the sky open. But we're family, she whispered, as if the words still carried weight. Family, I said, doesn't mean ownership. I waited. Finally, after muffled voices and hurried shuffling, Claudine agreed. Ronald's agreement came as a hollow echo behind her, too soft to carry conviction. Within an hour, I received a grainy photo of the signed document. Slanted signatures, hasty pen strokes, the ink still looking desperate even through the glass screen. I wired the money without another word. Closing the laptop felt heavier than lifting a mountain, but when I did, the air shifted slightly around me. It wasn't revenge. It was survival, dressed in legal ink. The silence after their return was almost kind. No angry calls, no long-winded explanations, no hollow apologies beyond a single clipped text from Claudine that read simply, "Sorry things turned out this way." Skylar's fallout arrived swiftly and without mercy. She faced minor legal troubles, community service, counseling mandates, but the real punishment was quieter, sharper. Family friends stopped inviting them to gatherings. Neighbors looked away when they passed. Even distant relatives, the ones who never quite liked me either, kept their distance from her now. I didn't reply to the apology text. I didn't need to. Walking through Bend, past the same coffee shops and bookstores that once felt too tight around my chest, I noticed how different everything felt. Lighter, somehow. Not because the places had changed, but because I had. I bought a coffee and sat outside, watching families pass by, their laughter weaving into the crisp afternoon air. Once, scenes like that would have hurt, a sharp reminder of something missing. Now, it just was. Not good, not bad, just life, unfolding. Flashes of childhood memories flickered through my mind. The birthday party where my cake was forgotten. The family photos where I was shoved to the edge, half-cropped from the frame. They didn't sting anymore. They were just pages in a book I no longer reread. That night, under the warm lamplight of my living room, I wrote a letter. I didn't plan to send it. It wasn't for them, it was for me. I thanked them. For the lessons, painful though they were. For teaching me how to stand alone, how to draw lines no one else was willing to draw. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the back of a drawer, hidden but not forgotten. I wasn't running anymore. Applying for a new job across the country wasn't an escape. It was a beginning, one I chose with clear eyes and steady hands. On a whim, I stopped by the local animal shelter the next weekend. A scrappy little mutt with a crooked tail and hopeful eyes pressed himself against the kennel bars. I named him Chance. He wagged his whole body when I said it out loud, like he understood. We walked home together that afternoon, two survivors stitched back together by quiet hope. At sunset, I found myself standing on the small bridge near the edge of town, Chance tugging gently at the leash, eager for the next adventure. I looked out over the river, the sky streaked gold and violet, and felt something shift inside me, a gentle, irrevocable letting go. Maybe family isn't who stays, it's who shows up when it matters. Sometimes walking away isn't about anger, it's about choosing peace when chaos demands your energy. Looking back, I realized the greatest gift I ever gave myself was permission to stop chasing approval from people who only saw me when it suited them. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent, like the moment you decide your story is worth telling, even if no one claps. What about you? Have you ever had to choose your own peace over pleasing others? How did you know it was time? I would love to hear your story. Drop a comment below, tell me where you're watching from, or just type 1 if this story touched your heart. If you enjoyed this journey and want more stories that speak to the quiet strength inside all of us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more voices, more healing, and more hope to light. See you in the next story.